Hi teachers, it's Laura Weaver. Once again, I'd like to thank you for all your help and assistance with the upcoming CogAT testing that we're doing for gifted education and identification of gifted students. You should have received a box today that has your consumable booklets for your students. They look like this. They have CogAT on the bottom, Level 8, Form 7. You'll notice inside the pages look like this, and the first page has little hats across the top. Second page has stars. And then you should have also received your directions for administration booklet, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit in this video. One thing that you need to take a look at, if you'd like, is the estimated testing time for each subtest. There are 9 subtests on this particular assessment. Each one lasts anywhere from 11 to 15 minutes if you're pacing yourself at a pretty good pace and being consistent, which averages out to be around a little over 2 hours. However, we schedule the test for 2.5 to 3 hours because we have to figure in time for some 5-minute breaks, directions, doing the sample questions, all those things that we do with regular testing. So if you wanted to take a look at the subtest and what each one of them comprises of, there's a description and an estimated time on page 3. If you go to page 5, it talks a little bit about accommodations. However, on this particular test, because of the grade level, we are reading the entire test to the students, so there really are no accommodations. If there were some that we had concerns about, we would have already scheduled a student to test one-on-one with a teacher. So you shouldn't need to worry about any accommodations or giving extra time. On page 15 of the booklet, this is the main page that helps you get started with the test. One thing I always make a note for myself is that students have gone to the restroom before they start. But fortunately for this one, students will come in, wash their hands following the safety protocol. So everyone should have gone to the restroom before they came into the room to prepare for the test. On page 15, it gives you directions on how to read aloud each part. All the text that is in blue, it will be preceded by the word say, and that means that you will say those words, and then the text in brown is just information that's there for you but is not to be read to the students. You can read the directions and item prompts as many times as necessary. However, because you're reading every question, you don't want to get into a big habit of reading them over and over and over. You kind of want to emphasize that students get it and help them get it the first or second time so that you don't have to keep going over and over. But with that said, we also want to make sure that students understand what they are supposed to do for each portion of the test. Speak slowly and distinctly. Pause to give students time to think. There are some places in here where it actually tells you to pause, so be sure and do that. Make sure that they understand the subtest directions and practice questions before you start. You can answer any questions about the directions. I would not start the subtest until you know everybody understands what they're supposed to do, because once you start testing, you may not answer any questions about specific items. Okay? For example, you cannot identify pictures for students, but things about protocols, procedures, mechanics of taking the test, that's fine. Use a natural speech pattern when administering the test. Read all directions and practice questions clearly. Everywhere that it says pause, be sure you stop for just a couple seconds. You can usually count 1, 2, 3, and that's plenty of time for a pause. Move around the room while they're taking the test, not really to just, hover over them, but just to make sure that they're on the right subtest, that they're marking the correct answers. In other words, if they're on question 3, are they marking question 3 in their booklet? I watch for those at least the first couple minutes to make sure everybody's marking theirs correctly. Make sure they keep their booklets opened flat so that they can be scanned properly, because this breaks down the spine a little bit and it helps the books go through the machine easier. If anything occurs that would have an adverse effect on the test, be sure and let me know, or you can let your principal know. Just with anything else, sometimes kids get sick, sometimes we have fire drills. So anything like that happens, be sure and let me know so that I can make note of that as these go in to be scored. One thing I do want to caution you about is the fact that you have to read every question, and I'll tell you it's very repetitive. So you want to be careful not to rush or appear frustrated as you get about halfway through, because you will get to a point to where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm having to say this again and again and again. But that's the nature of the test, and we want to be sure that it's equitable for everybody. So you'll notice the question will start out with a long direction, and then it'll get a little shorter for the second one, and then the third one it'll really be simplified. But just try to maintain a flow of reading throughout. Once you start to distribute your books, the one thing I always ask students to do is to look at the back of their consumable, which looks like this, hopefully. And I ask them to be sure that I spelled your name correctly. If you put a middle initial, make sure that it is the correct middle initial. That is optional. They're not going to know their ID number, but they should know their birth date. So make sure that you have their correct birth date there. Tell them to check that. Okay? All of these things we don't care about. You'll notice on the other video I said not to worry about these. You do need to mark gender, and then this information over here will be filled out. But the main thing the students are looking for is their name and date of birth. Make sure those are correct. So that's kind of your extra checkpoint. Okay, so once we're ready to start administering the test, you'll have 2 practice questions in the front. And these are the ones with the baseball cap across the top. And these 2 practice questions are really just to show students how to make the correct mark, okay? And then once you start for subtest picture analogies, this is the one that's in orange, has stars across the top of the first page. You will start actually doing your practice sample questions for this test, and then you will start the test on the next page. So just to give you an example of what this is like, I want to read what the script says for you to do for picture analogies. Okay? It tells them to move to the next page. You should be on the page with the stars. This is a practice page, and you'll see it's got P1, P2. Let's answer the first practice question. Look at the pictures in the top row. Okay, and you might want to hold up your booklet to show them that this is the top row. And this is their top row. This is the bottom row of the big box. And the question says, how do a kitten and a cat go together? So on the left side we have a kitten, and on the right side we have a full-grown cat. Then in brown it tells you to pause while students think about the question. You can also encourage responses. Okay, that's perfectly fine because these are just practice questions. You can say, a kitten grows up to be a cat. Now look at the bottom row of the big box. Do you see the puppy? This is the puppy, and this is what they're trying to answer. Which answer picture goes with the puppy in the same way that a kitten goes with a cat? And usually what I do with this first one is I will say, okay, so in the top box we had a kitten that grew in to be an adult cat. Now we have a puppy, and what is it going to grow into become? A cow, a bigger dog or a full-grown dog, or a kitten? Now, you know, that question's pretty obvious to kids, but we're really just trying to get them familiar with the type of questioning. So you would let them mark the one they think is correct, and then you would read, a puppy grows up to be a dog just as a kitten grows up to be a cat. Fill in the circle under the picture of the dog to show it belongs in the empty box. And again, this is all about you encouraging them to come up with the right answers, to show them how to determine what the answer is, and then to how to mark it properly. Okay, so the next practice question it says, now let's answer the next practice question. Look at the box with a foot, a shoe, and a hand inside. How do a foot and a shoe go together? Pause. You wear a shoe on your foot. Now look at the bottom row of the big box. Do you see the hand? Point to the answer picture. So you can hold your booklet up and actually show them what you're talking about as they're looking at their booklet. Which answer picture goes with a hand in the same way that a shoe goes with a foot? Again, it tells you that you can encourage responses. You wear a glove on your hand just as you wear a shoe on your foot. Fill in the circle under the glove to show it belongs in the empty box. Okay, so the glove would be the same, fit the same way that a shoe fits a foot. To answer these questions, figure out how the pictures in the top row go together. Then make the pictures in the bottom row of the big box go together in the same way. And then it tells you from this point the subtest is paced. Allow time for them to answer each question. When students have finished marking their answers, check off the question with a pencil if you want to do that. It's totally up to you. Then move on to the next question. Okay, so I want to turn over quickly to the next page. And this one says picture analogies, and it'll tell you, look at the page with the feathers across the top. Okay, and here's an example of what the directions say when I say that it'll sound redundant, but you know, you kind of have to keep that same pace with what you say. So this is what the directions say. Look at number 1. Figure out how the pictures in the top row go together. Then find the answer that makes the pictures in the bottom row of the big box go together in the same way. Fill in the circle under the correct answer. Number 2. Look at number 2. Figure out how the pictures in the top row go together. Make the pictures in the bottom row of the big box go together in the same way. Fill in the circle under the correct answer. Look at number 3. Fill in the circle under the answer picture that belongs in the empty box. So you'll notice that the directions for 1, 2, and 3, it starts out with the full explanation, then it kind of becomes a condensed version of the first one, and then the third one's even more condensed. So even though you're saying the same thing over and over and over, it's very consistent. Okay, so that's the main thing. Just try not to rush and get frustrated. I usually try to do 2 subtests at a time, then give them a short 5-minute break, and then we move on. Okay, but you can determine with your kids whether or not you think they're getting antsy. One thing that I always encounter, kids go through their booklets, and because their booklet's really thick, and the reason it is because there are only 2, 3, 4 questions per page, and the questions are all pictures and they're very big. So you might want to calm their anxieties by saying, hey, don't worry about how many pages there are. You know, we've got plenty of time, and there's only a few questions per page, so that's why the booklet is so big. You also want to be sure you watch for stray marks, because any stray mark can be picked up by the scoring machine. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I hope this helped a little bit with what you will be encountering with this test next week. And again, thank you so much for all your help with helping us get this done. And I really hope everything goes smoothly for you. Thanks so much.